No one understands why farmers' land went unsold until now. How much bad fortune could one family take? It wasn't just a few buildings and clumps of dirt that was about to slip away. It was over 100 years of history, countless smiles and endless stores. But now, it was all over. Everything they loved was about to slip away into the hands of a stranger. David loved the 80 acres with every fiber of his farmer's heart. It might have been an old-fashioned practice, but passing on an entire family business and land inheritance from generation to generation was at the core of their family's philosophy. It was his own dream to, one day, give it to his son. But suddenly, bad luck hit. It was miles of beautiful corn and grazing pastures. He wanted nothing more than to spend the rest of his life there. But when the family hit financial hardship, they thought that selling it to a far-off relative would solve their problems. It turns out they trusted the wrong person. They weren't the only ones who were having problems. It was like the lands were cursed. Some farmers found rickety solutions, while others sold and moved away. David watched as his father's land was repossessed and fell into the hands of greed. An auction sign popped up along the barbed wire fence. That was it. They were doomed. Auctions were where vultures swooped in to pick the carcasses of poor families. It was the chance for big business or land developers to buy cheap and dream of strip malls or condos. More than anything, he wanted to buy back the land. But where would he get the money in time? His family reached out to whoever would listen. David didn't care. He was ready to abandon dignity and beg for spare change if needed. It didn't just break his heart. It shattered his old man's dream. But the passage of time didn't care, and the auction date rolled around. It was a dismal sum, barely enough to carry a glimmer of hope. But they had to try. Maybe they would get lucky? But as they pulled up the long, familiar driveway, David felt his heart drop into his stomach and twist until he felt sick. There were over 100 farmers there, all waiting for bidding to start. It took every ounce of strength to keep himself from crying. He had to be strong for the old man and his young boy. The walk to the stage felt like miles. And it only got worse when he saw one man in a big cowboy and expensive boots. This guy was loaded and looking determined. A thin man in a worn suit walked onto the stage and explained the details of the sale. He slammed the gavel and announced the opening bid. David felt a panic attack coming. Their emergency fundraising was barely enough to cover it and possibly one bid more. David raised his hand, opening the money war. It was as he feared. The rich cowboy shifted and took a step closer. This guy had diamonds on more than one finger and one in a tooth. David felt like he would crumble into the ground, the very ground he was born on. Maybe the guy would hire them to work on the land? Then, something unexpected happened. He braced for another bid, but none came. The rich guy crossed his arms and stood as still as the rest of the crowd. The auctioneer cleared his throat and tried again, coaxing the price to go higher. No one said a word. David's confusion grew. Again and again, the thin man tried, but no one bid. It was as quiet and still as the early mornings when they started chores. As David looked around, he finally understood what was going on. The large gathering of farmers was looking at his family with sympathy and support. They were going to let him win. With hard glares and solidarity, the crowd finally got their message across. The auctioneer let out a surprised huff and let David's bid go through. They had won their land back. But what was going on? He barely knew a fraction of the people that were there. It turns out the rich cowboy had the answer. There's a code among farmers. We all came here to help. Good luck and good farming, he said, with a warm smile and firm handshake. David felt utterly humbled. He had never expected anything like this in his entire life. He also knew he couldn't let it end there. Wait, he shouted. As the crowd left, many giving nods and tips of the hat, David felt utterly humbled. He had never expected anything like this in his entire life. But he was sure of one thing. It was a new reality he wasn't going to waste. He would work extra hard to make sure their land stayed in their family. But it just wasn't enough. He wiped the stray tears and asked how he could somehow repay the kindness to everyone. It turned out, David wasn't the only one struggling. Next week we have another guy that needs help. But it's gonna be much harder. David listened in disbelief as the complex plan was laid out. It wasn't going to be a simple display of silence and solidarity that had saved him. The enemy was a big fish corporation. It would be no place for his young son. 1 week later, David yawned and took another swig of coffee from his thermos. All he could see was the glow of the headlights and the beams from the car behind. The sun wasn't even close to breaking the horizon. At first, it was just his father following in their old pickup. But soon, more lights joined. A string of cars rushed down the highway, forming a long, determined train. When they finally reached their destination, David couldn't believe his eyes. The sides of the damp country road were already lined with cars as far as the eye could see. And the parking wasn't casual, it was tactical. Farmers in reflective vests waved people into place, then instructed them to their next points of action. David found a bucket in his hands and told him to start spreading water over whatever area he was told to. Even the rich cowboy was there doing something very interesting. With the skill of an old man of the land, he maneuvered a large tractor around the ground, creating a thick layer of gushy mud. By the time sun rested high in the sky, it looked like the old farmhouse sat in the middle of a swamp. The auction was nearly upon them. It was time for the next stage. The crowd was cold and dirty, but the resolve in their eyes was burning like any desert. A new auctioneer was helped across the mud and escorted to the platform. Then the enemy has also arrived. An expensive black BMW rushed down the line of cars, and a man in a lavish suit ran toward the farm. Every car they could bring was a barrier meant to delay the representative of the big GMO corporation. 11 a.m. sharp, the auction started. The opening bid sounded. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the rep try to maneuver through the thick mud. One man put up his hand. The rest of the group stayed quiet, just as they had for David. Near the front, a family of 5 hugged each other, looking so scared. No other bids came. The GMO rep struggled through the dirt, trying to save his precious suit and pricey shoes. But when he saw he was missing his chance, he tried to run. The crowd slowly formed into an impenetrable wall. There would be no violence, only a gritty resistance. The rep still struggled to get to the group and was too far away to be heard. The auctioneer didn't even notice, he was too focused on the lack of immediate bids. Finally, the gavel came down. There was no cheering, but plenty of smirks and chuckles as the rep cursed, sighed, and stormed off. David watched as the family cried tears of relief and thanked everyone over and over. Only a week ago, that was him. It was a new, deep connection to land and community he never thought possible. He couldn't wait for the next one. Thank you for watching this fantastic story. Please tap one of the 2 videos on your screen for another amazing Wonder Stories.